There are moments in the NFL that look chaotic on the surface, but underneath, they're actually very quiet. Quiet moments are where organizations reveal what they haven't settled yet, not publicly, not in press conferences, but internally in how they react when pressure shows up from different directions at the same time. Right now, Cleveland is sitting inside one of those moments, not because of a single rumor, not because of a single name, but because multiple tensions that were supposed to stay separate are starting to overlap. When that happens, decision-making changes, timelines tighten, motivations blur, and things that were once off the table quietly become discussable. This is usually where people rush to take sides, to argue personalities, to debate optics, but that misses the more important question. What does it say about an organization when unresolved issues resurface together instead of one at a time? Because teams that are aligned don't revisit old tensions this way. They absorb them. They move past them. Teams that haven't tend to circle back under stress. That doesn't mean anything is broken yet. It means something hasn't been resolved. And when unresolved questions meet leadership pressure, the outcomes don't announce themselves loudly. They show up subtly in who gets considered, who gets reevaluated. And what suddenly feels possible, that's where Cleveland is now, not at a conclusion, but at a convergence. And those moments usually matter more than fans realize at the time. What makes this phase uncomfortable for organizations isn't uncertainty. It's partial clarity, because by the time a search reaches this stage, teams usually know what they don't want. They've filtered out extremes. They've moved past first impressions. They've begun aligning internally around what feels viable. That's not confusion.
Okay, so here's why everything has changed for the Cleveland Browns. Well, the Browns need to satisfy the Rooney Rule still. Because Mike McDaniel has withdrawn from their head coach search, the Browns need to find another minority candidate to interview in person. Well, who in their right mind would fly to Cleveland for an interview that they're probably not going to get?
That's convergence, and convergence is where pressure begins to change behavior. This is the point where timelines start to speak louder than statements, where silence becomes more revealing than leaks, where what isn't happening carries more meaning than what is. If Cleveland were drifting, you'd see noise, more names, more speculation, more reactive messaging. Instead, what we're seeing is restraint that tells us something. It suggests the organization is protecting optionality, trying not to collapse possibilities before internal alignment is secure. That's a leadership instinct, not a PR one. But here's the tension. OPTIO. An ALITY has a cost. Every day a decision isn't made, other timelines continue moving. Candidates adjust expectations. Assistants make plans. Front offices elsewhere close doors, not loudly, but definitively. So patience stops being neutral. It becomes a filter. This is where coaching searches quietly turn strategic, because the longer a process stays open, the more it selects for candidates who are comfortable with ambiguity, who trust internal process, who aren't seeking immediate authority validation. That can be a strength. It can also narrow the field in ways teams don't fully intend, and that's why this moment matters now, not at the end of the process. Not at the podium. This is the stage where leadership philosophy stops being theoretical and starts shaping outcomes, where decisions are influenced not by urgency, but by tolerance for unresolved questions. That's not inherently wrong, but it does mean the final choice will reflect more than resume or scheme. It will reflect how this organization responds when patience and pressure intersect. That's the real signal emerging. Here, not who Cleveland hires, but who remains viable long enough to be hired, because by the time a name is announced, the narrowing will already have happened. At this stage of a search, leadership isn't expressed through urgency. It's expressed through restraint. Organizations under real pressure tend to do one of two things. They either accelerate to regain control, or they slow down to preserve it. Cleveland has chosen the second. That choice tells us where authority actually lives inside the building. Because slowing a process only works if leadership trusts its internal alignment. If decision makers believe disagreement can exist without destabilizing the outcome. If power isn't threatened by deliberation, that's not common. Most NFL searches speed up not because clarity is achieved, but because anxiety creeps in, because silence starts to feel like weakness, because external narratives begin to shape internal confidence. Restraint pushes back against that, but restraint also exposes hierarchy. It clarifies whose voice carries weight when timelines compress, whose comfort matters most when uncertainty lingers, Whose version of patience defines the process? This is where front office and coaching philosophy either truly align or quietly negotiate, because slowing down a search doesn't eliminate pressure. It redistributes it. Pressure moves inward, into meeting rooms, into long conversations about risk tolerance, development timelines, and organizational trust, and those conversations shape the future more than any press release. What's being tested here isn't just candidate fit, it's whether leadership can maintain cohesion without rushing toward resolution that requires confidence. But it also requires accountability, because patience only works if everyone agrees on what they're being patient for. Shared understanding exists. Restraint becomes a competitive advantage. It filters out misalignment early. It ensures authority is clear before authority is exercised. If it doesn't exist, restraint becomes avoidance, a way to delay confrontation rather than resolve it. And that distinction matters because players feel it. Coaches sense it. Quarterbacks especially absorb it. They can tell when a building is unified behind a direction and when it's unified only behind delay. This phase will determine which one Cleveland is practicing, not through public comments, but through consistency. Consistency in messaging, consistency in evaluation, consistency in how long uncertainty is allowed to persist without becoming indecision. That's the real leadership test embedded in this search, and whatever passes, that test will shape not just the next hire, but the environment that hire walks into. Because leadership isn't defined by the decision itself. It's defined by the process. The decision emerges from. Every NFL decision exists inside at least two timelines: the one the organization controls, and the one it coaching searches live at the intersection of both. Internally, Cleveland can move at its own pace. It can emphasize alignment, protect process, and resist external pressure. But externally, other clocks keep running: player development windows, quarterback evaluation cycles, contract realities, and league-wide movement. Those timelines don't pause just because an organization is being deliberate. Eventually, they begin to interact. That's when decisions feel heavier, because this is no longer about who fits best. It's about when that fit still matters. Quarterback development is the clearest example. Young quarterbacks don't just need good coaching, they need stable messaging, shared expectations, and a consistent standard across seasons. When coaching decisions stretch too long, that stability gets harder to maintain. Even if intentions remain sound, the risk isn't chaos. It's compression. Compressed timelines force acceleration later. They reduce the margin for adjustment. They make early misalignment more expensive than it needs to be. That's why organizations that value patience early must be even more precise once direction is chosen, because patience upfront only works if conviction follows. This is where Cleveland's process will ultimately be judged, not by how long the search took, but by how clearly the next phase unfolds. If the hire comes with immediate structural clarity, staff authority, development priorities, communication lanes, then the patience was strategic. If it doesn't, the patience becomes a liability. And quarterbacks feel that first. They experience it in mixed signals, in shifting emphasis, in uncertainty that lingers just long enough to disrupt growth. This isn't speculation. It's pattern across the league. The teams that succeed with quarterback development aren't the ones that move fastest or slowest. They're the ones that align timelines early and protect them relentlessly. Cleveland is approaching the point where alignment can no longer be deferred, not because the search failed, but because other clocks are now close enough to matter. What happens next won't announce itself dramatically. It will show up in structure, in staffing decisions, in how quickly clarity replaces caution. That's when we'll know whether this process preserved flexibility or quietly spent it, because in the NFL, futures rarely collapse all at once. They narrow, and once they do, every decision carries more weight than the one before it.
Rather than growth. Sharp framed it as a mismatch of timing. A young quarterback entering the league needs a coach whose role is secure, whose philosophy won't shift with every disappointing stretch, and whose authority isn't questioned weekly. In Cleveland, coaching speculation has become routine. Even productive seasons are followed by debate. That environment creates pressure that spills directly onto the quarterback. Sharp argued that expecting Mike McDaniel to walk into that dynamic and immediately stabilize it, while also developing a high-profile rookie, is unrealistic. Another layer of Sharp's argument focused on accountability. In stable organizations, Coaching decisions are insulated from weekly emotional swings. Losses don't trigger panic. Development is allowed to play out. In unstable ones, quarterbacks become the focal point for frustration. And coaches are forced to adapt their approach just to survive. That's where Sharp sees the danger, pairing ShedeurSanders with a coach whose own job. Security could become part of the weekly. Conversation places both in a defensive position. Instead of building, they'd be managing optics. Instead of developing, they'd be answering narratives. Sharp also highlighted the Browns' recent tendency to chase solutions rather than establish systems. Attaching high-profile names to unresolved structural issues creates short-term excitement but long-term confusion. In that context, the McDaniel-Sanders idea becomes another headline rather than a plan.